Hello everyone, my name is Lady Corvina, and today we are going to be showing how to rig a model for IRIAM. IRIAM is a vertical mobile-only streaming platform, and because of that there are some different requirements that are needed versus just importing your model into something like VTube Studio. Uh, to go through this, there is a guideline document that is provided to anyone who is accepted into IRIAM, and I assume it will be public once IRIAM is open to the public. So we are going to be referencing that document a lot, and I will be editing in screenshots as applicable. The document is extremely long, but that being said, most of it is just suggestions that are not actually necessary for rigging on IRIAM. And so because of that, we're going to go over basically the most important parts and really break down what is actually required versus what is just a suggestion. This was created because a lot of people got very intimidated by how long the document was, so I really just wanted to break it down in a more simple term. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So to start with the basics, what we want to do is make sure that our model looks the way we want it to when we export it. So since IRIAM doesn't have toggles, if you are a person with different arm positions or facial expressions or even just like blood splatters or glasses, if you want these features to be shown on IRIAM, you have to set it so that they are visible at the 0 parameter. So what we are going to do, since I want my glasses to be visible when I am on IRIAM, we are just going to change it and set the opacity to 100% at 0. So there's not really a difference between the toggles at this point. If you want something like tears to show up, you must rig it to something like the brow parameters. So, like, for instance, if you want the tears to show up when your character is sad, you would just rig the tears to become visible at that point. The other thing we need to do in order to make sure that it is export ready is we are going to open up the texture atlas. It's going to take a little bit. And we want to make sure that all of our textures are at 2048 by 2048. You can only have 4 textures for IRIAM, and they must be 2048 by 2048. No bigger. I guess they can be smaller, but I wouldn't recommend that. And the most important thing with this texture atlas is to make sure that the things that are at the upper body, so like basically what's visible here, are the biggest things on the texture atlases. So you can see here, if you press the T key, it will turn on and off the texture atlas preview. So right now this is at full size. So this is how the model was imported into Live 2D. This is, how the artist drew it. But when we turn on the T key, you can see it becomes blurrier. This is because since this stuff is all below the waist, I went ahead and made it smaller in the texture atlas so that the biggest pieces are the face and chest. This is just because, frankly, this is what you're going to see most of the time on IRIAM, and it is more worth it to use your texture atlases for the upper body because the full body will basically only be shown pretty small, so you can't even really notice the blurriness there. So basically anything from the chest up, I would recommend making very large. And I will open this up. So you can see I put pretty much everything that wasn't going to be visible on the same texture atlas, and then I made the face parts really large. You can see here the hair is really large, the parts of the hat, and then the chest parts that are visible. The parameters for IRIAM are basically the same as the Live 2D defaults, as well as the VTube Studio defaults. However, there are a few things that are a little different. The first is that the eye open parameters only go up to 1 on IRIAM, so you won't be getting this shocked eye unless you make that at the 1 parameter. Personally, I would not recommend that, as it will basically always mean if your eyes are open that you will look shocked. However, if that is something that is important to the character, that is something to consider, as the parameters do not go over 1. The other thing is that the brow Y is only from 0 to 1 on IRIAM, so you cannot lower the eyebrow all the way down like this on IRIAM. So make sure you keep that in mind if you have a lot of expressions that work off of the brow Y being low, to just tweak them a bit so that they work at 0. You also have brow form. Brow form is actually the opposite of brow Y in that it is only from -1 to 0, so you can't really get that shocked or angry expression depending on how you use brow form 1. So basically, you're going to have your sad eyebrow at -1 and then your neutral eyebrow at 0. I would not recommend making the sad brow at 0, as that will just make your character always look sad when tracking. Next, we are going to look at the model statistics folder. This is probably not something that most people will be looking at if you're just rigging for VTube Studio. But for IRIAM, it is kind of important. So what we are looking for specifically is the mask ID permutation types. The requirement is that it has to be less than 37. It is recommended to be less than 30, but that's not a requirement. The other thing we want to look at is the number of polygons. It is recommended that you limit it to 25,000 or less. Again, this is not a requirement, and I have definitely imported models with way more than that. However, it might lag a bit depending on your phone, so just keep that in mind. If you are having issues with polygon count, what I would recommend is going to all the non-essential parts and really just like reducing it to like little deformation, and then even going further than that and just like deleting some points, which you can do here and so on. It will mean that the movement will be a little less smooth, most likely. However, again, you're not really ever going to see this lower part of the body, so you can reduce that a lot. Like I said, though, that is basically only a recommendation. If you feel like this is how your model works best, or you have a lot of glue or whatever, you don't have to worry about that. For physics, it basically is, again, only recommended settings. You can set it to 60 FPS for the best result, and then limit the output to 100 if that's something you're worried about. You also do not have to add the keyframes onto angle X, angle Y, angle Z if you usually rig with augmented physics, which is what I'm doing here. It'll work fine in IRIAM. Now that you have your model set up how you want it to look on IRIAM, what we are going to do is import the IRIAM settings file. So the first thing we have to do is change the canvas size. So you can see here, this is my canvas size currently, and we're going to change it to 2894 by 4093. Again, we are going to be referencing that document that was sent to us. It's going to look like this, and that's fine. It's fine if your model is sticking out, because we are going to be like fixing that with the settings. What we're going to do next is we are going to drag and drop the IRIAM settings file, which is called IRIAM settings.cmp3. And I'm going to wait for my folder to do that. And we're just going to drop that in there. And it should automatically import in. You can see here. And you can see also that there are already keys on there. We are going to be resetting a lot of that, but we're not going to worry about it right now. So next, what we are going to do is we are going to take all of our parameters, and I have it here as a position deform, like as a warp deformer, but however you have it sorted, you are going to want to drag that into the position reset. And now everything should be attached to that position reset. So what we're going to do first is we are going to select the position reset deformer here, and we are going to go ahead and remove the keyframes from position reset by just clicking the remove keyframes button. And what we're going to do is we are going to move the rotation deformer to the middle of the face. It doesn't have to be super precise, but this is just to give us a better way to position. So we're going to try and make it as centered as possible here. You can see that. And then we are going to set a keyframe. So this is going to be the 1 keyframe. So we're going to set it back to 0. And what we are going to have to do is move it to the center of this green circle. So let me get this. So we are going to take this, and for whatever reason my model is kind of off center, so we are just going to go ahead and move it in here. And we are going to shrink it so that the bottom of the chin is touching the green circle as best as possible. And have it so that the top of the head is at the top of the green circle. You don't want it to be like this. You want it to be so that the top of the head, excluding like any hats or anything, is in this green circle. So my hair would be like that. And make it like a little bit bigger. And there we go. And that will be our 0, and then when it goes to 1, it'll adjust that way. But that's all we want to worry about. Next, we're going to grab the scale button. And what we are going to do is at -10, we are going to shrink the model until the toes are touching the bottom of the screen right here. So it's a little bit hard to tell because my model is also red. So let me see if I can bump up the opacity here. So you can see here, we want the toes to be touching the top of the green here at the -10 scale all. Right, we're going to do that. Looks about right. And then for the 10, we are going to zoom it so that the eyes are just touching the edge of the red here, which again, it's a little bit hard to tell due to my model's colors. I apologize. But you can see here, I prefer to have my eyes like really close to the edge here, but if you would prefer it to be less extreme, you can do it with just the eyelashes touching the edge here. And that is our scale all done. Next we have position X, which position X and Y are pretty straightforward. This is basically just how far left and right and up and down your character model is going to move. So for this, we're going to press Shift, and we are just going to move it so that the eye is just off the screen here, and that's at -10 position X. And then we are going to do the same thing for the 10 parameter, except in the opposite direction. You can also just reflect it using reflect motion and make sure it's set horizontally. But I like to do it by hand just to make doubly sure that it is the result I want. Then for position Y, again, pretty straightforward. All we're going to do is at -10, we're just going to move our character all the way off the screen here so that they are not visible. And then for 10 on position Y, we are going to move it so that the eyes are touching the top of the green bar. And then what we're going to do is click the Synthesize Corners button. We're just going to do position X and Y. And now, if you move it around, you'll see that it is moving at all cardinal directions. All right, that is all of the IRIAM adjustments we have to make. So what we're going to do is we're going to export for runtime, export as MOC3 file. And what we're going to do, this is very important, you have to set the SDK to something below 5.0. So you can do 4.2, and that's fine, but make sure it is not marked as 5.0 or newer. It has to be 4.2 or lower. And then what we're going to do is we are going to uncheck export calculate FPS, export display information, and apply prevention of color leakage to texture. So you only want the export's physics settings file and the export user data file boxes checked. We want to make sure that the model is centered at 0.50 and 0.50. And then what we're going to do is change the pixels per unit to 220.20. Make sure that this is set at 1:1. Make sure the export type is SDK. All this is pretty standard, so that's probably doesn't need to be changed much. And then you're just going to click OK. That's fine. And then we are going to make a new folder just to make it easier. Outfit IRIAM. And we are just going to import all that in. You can see here you have the texture atlas, which should all be 2048. You have the MOC3, and then you have the other two files, and that's basically all you need to send to the IRIAM staff. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Definitely pay attention to the document that is sent. And yeah, I hope that that was helpful. So thank you everyone so much, and I hope to see you guys on IRIAM.